Can you tell us what's the main aim of Joe Biden's visit to Seoul?
Well, I think one of the main objectives is to establish a personal relationship between the two presidents. President Yoon was just inaugurated in recent days, earlier this month. And I think some of the critical decisions that would be made in time of crisis or military conflict, those types of serious emergency type of issues, it would rise to the presidential level and it would require coordination between the two presidents. So establishing that personal relationship, trust, and communication style, I think, is one of the most important things. And of course, there's a long list of issue items that they will discuss and that the working teams will discuss as well.
Well, is there any significant shift in foreign policy for the new administration, particularly where China and North Korea are concerned? And how might Joe Biden address these?
Well, first of all, President Biden served for many years, for decades, on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, so he's very experienced with foreign policy. President Yoon is not a politician. He was a prosecutor. He has a legal background, but many of his advisors and close advisors have been educated abroad and are very adept at navigating in that type of that world of international institutions and coordinating with allies to address global issues. So I think that will be kind of a seamless integration of the two teams. And the previous administration, I think, was more focused internally on North Korea and maybe was more hopeful, invested a lot of political capital in trying to, reach some kind of reconciliation with North Korea. Ultimately, it did not really succeed. And now we have a number of potential crises in North Korea with, you mentioned the nuclear test, but now COVID cases breaking out in North Korea. Global food insecurity could impact North Korea as well. So there are a number of potential problems and contingencies that the two sides and other allies might cooperate to address in the near future.
Meanwhile, how does South Korea maintain both its alliance with the US and trade relations, very important, with China? How difficult a balancing act is it?
Yes, that's very difficult. I mean, it's similar to Australia's relationship in many ways, right? So China has taken what I would call unorthodox sanctions actions against Australia, also with South Korea. Over the past couple of decades, there have been some notorious cases of that. For example, when South Korea deployed a missile defense battery, the U.S. forces in Korea deployed a missile defense battery in the South. China retaliated against South Korean firms and denied visas to business people and entertainers and so forth. So navigating that is very difficult. I think the two sides have to look at the challenges or the threats in which are a priority. For example, for South Korea, China encroaches upon South Korean territorial waters for illegal fishing. So that's something that affects South Korea directly, but it doesn't affect their allies. Deploying new missile defense systems in the South to counter North Korean missile threat, how is China going to act in that case? Supply chain issues, vulnerability to supply chains. That's an area where South Korea and the U.S. and other allies can cooperate, moving vulnerable supply chains out of China. But on other issues, the sides have to cooperate, climate change and other issues. So it's a very complex relationship, and they'll have to coordinate how they will act and how they will form their responses in managing and dealing with China.
Mm. And going back to the threat from North Korea, there is a possibility that Pyongyang will conduct a missile test while the US president is in the country. How provocative would that be?
I think it would be, quite provocative. That hasn't happened before, but we can look back to 2009, early in the Obama administration, when President Biden was the vice president. And on the same day that President Obama gave this keynote speech, a very important policy speech on future nuclear disarmament, North Korea tested a long-range missile. So I know at that time people in the White House and the National Security Council, the president, were very angry about this, and it really put a chill on relations and made any kind of diplomatic progress difficult or impossible. So I think if that were to happen, basically North Korea would be burning all bridges and sending a signal that they're not interested in any kind of cooperation or cooperative relationship. So I think it would send a very, very bad signal.
How different is Joe Biden's approach to dealing with tensions on the Korean Peninsula compared to his predecessor, Donald Trump, who did make a visit to Pyongyang when he was in office?
I don't really want to assess Donald Trump's foreign policy, which I think it was more, foreign policy by reality TV. President Biden recognizes and understands the complexity of the world and different security challenges and problems, and certainly his advisors and his close advisors and national security team does. And they recognize the necessity to maintain alliances and partnerships because many of the very complex and difficult transboundary problems and security threats cannot be resolved by any single actor. So like-minded states, international institutions have to cooperate and coordinate their response to difficult security challenges such as North Korea. So the types of threats, whether it's aggression, military aggression, nuclear proliferation, selling or smuggling arms or components or technology, supporting some kind of terrorist groups or other state actors that cause disruption and instability. That requires a coordinated response. So maintaining those relationships are important to manage those problems as opposed to coddling dictators and trying to persuade dictators and authoritarian figures to cooperate somehow. I think that was failure in the most part in how Trump approached those relationships.
And Daniel, you touched before on North Korea and its handling of the coronavirus pandemic. It's finally publicly announced that it is dealing with an outbreak. What do we know about how serious it really is there?
Yeah, it's very difficult to say because even though very recently North Korea has started to publish some data, some supposed cases, they don't have the diagnostic equipment or the tests. They're logging fevers or cases of fevers. We don't know the cause of that. They don't have therapeutics, no vaccines. So we don't know what the internal data they have, which I think is very poor. So, and then having the capabilities to respond and contain the virus, they're very weak in that area. The one thing they are good at is maintaining control of the population and movement. So just locking down the population, making it impossible to travel around and move around, that can slow down the contagion somewhat. But on the other hand, that can have a very dire effect upon the economy. Slowing down logistics and movement of materials. It's planting season now. People need to go out into the fields for agricultural work. So if they really force a strict lockdown, it can have a very bad economic effect at this time.
And Daniel, just lastly, President Biden will be heading to Tokyo next. The Quad group will be meeting early next week. That's the US, Japan, India and Australia. How much does South Korea want to be a part of this?
Well, I think being a full member, participatory member like the 4 members of the Quad will be difficult. So I think while Biden and his team is here, they will discuss what areas that South Korea can support, whether it's intelligence sharing or some kind of assistance or support. They can cooperate in ways that will not require a full membership of South Korea, which will be sensitive in other ways. So I think they will figure out what kind of role South Korea can play in a supportive role.
Daniel, great to get your views. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Great to be here.